a different bottle with a different label, and it impugns your credibility. So
Well, I mean, just to Steel Man, maybe the other side, or
yeah,
maybe to Steel Man, Prime's went a little bit more. Not that he can't do it himself, but like hired to actually reach toxic levels or what would be considered unsafe levels is just not really. You're highly unlikely to encounter that uh, in the real world.
exactly. I mean, guys, we're not plants. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have some interesting articles this week on the anti-MAHA headquarters, pro science power hour, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of like a two-parter system, the two-parter thing. But basically, the Supreme Court rejected the lawsuit alleging Roundup weed killer caused cancer. So the the court's decision is likely to determine the future of thousands of lawsuits against Bayer, which manufactures the weed killer, over similar claims. So Bayer owns Monsanto, and Monsanto creates two products. One is an herbicide that has glyphosate in it, which is a chemical that attacks and kills plants. And if you have a special little cassette of DNA inside of your genome, if you're a plant, then you're protected from this is why Roundup Ready corn can survive glyphosate, because they have a little defense DNA code in their genome. The Supreme Court on Thursday sided with the manufacturer of the weed killer Roundup, overturning a jury award for a Missouri man who claimed the widely used herbicide caused cancer, in a decision that could have sweeping impacts on thousands of other Americans who similarly claimed the product sickened them. In a 7-2 decision written by Kavanaugh, the majority found that a federal law that regulates pesticides barred the Missouri man's lawsuit. So basically, there's a federal law that regulates pesticides, saying that if the EPA says something's safe, then they don't have to put something on it. And there was a lower court that said, no, we found that this did cause a problem. And Monsanto's saying, hey, EPA is saying that this is safe. This district court saying that we have to put something on our thing. Why is that okay? And then last paragraph, Justice Kavanaugh wrote that the Missouri case would, quote, require a cancer warning on Roundup's label, end quote, which would directly conflict with the label required by the federal EPA. Because of this conflict, he wrote, federal law, quote, expressly preempts, end quote, the Missouri man's claim. So before,
Yeah. So, well, so from what I understand, it's like, let's say the decision was largely driven by like essentially like there's this conflict between federal law and state law, and like since the EPA determined that Roundup was essentially safe, and that basically it seems like Roundup or whatever Bayer was like following the label guidelines by the EPA, but then they were not technically, I guess, following the state guidelines, and that's where sort of like the conflict arose. But then, like whatever, I guess the federal understandably overrides the state,
yeah,
or rather, well, from Bayer's perspective, they were following all the laws, and it doesn't make much sense, understandably, of like the state holding them liable when they're following the EPA federal guidelines,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Fine.
Yeah,
And I also like I agree with the decision, and so I understand. One of the reasons why, even though I guess like this is not strictly a MAHA topic, because I think there's definitely people on the left that are opposed to Roundup. Not that I'm super pro Roundup of like people should add to their coffees or whatnot, but like I know that this spans, from what I understand, like across the aisle. Even though I think it's largely, MAHA is super focused on it. But I think even we saw in like the dissenting opinion, there's one of the liberal judges dissented, right? Although I think they dissented due to the fact that like whatever, not due to them, not due to the science, but rather like the reading of the law, interpretation of the law. If I interpreted the article correctly. But all that to say, even though this is a conservative Supreme Court and they're making this decision makes sense to me.
I think it does too. What do you think, Prem?
I don't know about like. I feel like this is. I feel like they give states special permission to do all kinds of things, I mean, they just gave states permission to decide whether, trans people can be a part of their of sports.
Mhm.
And how to regulate that. Um, like uh, having extra regulations on a product. I don't know that. Like, sorry, by extra, my that means like extra labeling. Oh, that sounds pretty reasonable to me. Especially something that's dealing with our food source. So I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I'm more torn on this.
Yeah, I understand.
But I can be convinced. Okay.
I think I understand being torn, and in some sense, I am too. As in, am I opposed to labeling? And let's say to the good point that you brought up, like states have exceptions all the time,
Mhm.
and like, well, generally speaking, conservatives tend to be all about states' rights, right? And so one would think that they would want to uphold states' rights in this case. And so, like, am I opposed for a state imposing their own, I guess, unique labeling laws? My answer is no. But then, would I want a state to impose like having Roundup a label as a carcinogen? My answer is no to that. That's where I would be torn.
Yeah, I mean it's a tough decision. I mean, imagine this went the other way, and then you had pro raw milk advocates saying, "Hey, like pasteurized milk isn't 100% safe either. There's been problems with that." And they say, okay, well, if we're going to have a warning label on raw milk, we should have a warning label on pasteurized milk and put that on there. When the EPA is like, well, we've studied pasteurized milk and it doesn't deem necessary to have that on there. But I could see some like companies just being like, I
But
guess
like
I guess
that's
it's the
where if it
cost,
were the
right?
opposite, like my opinion. Sorry to interrupt. My
Go
opinion
for it.
would probably change. As in, like if the EPA was saying that Roundup is a carcinogen, but then this state was saying, well, actually, it's not. Like that would I would be in probably a different position,
For
right?
sure. No, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I think that the malady and if it's actually doing harm, then having it at the federal level would absolutely, because then it's like a free, um, it's like a freedom issue where you can't, like, just because you're in some parts of the country doesn't mean that it's okay for you to have carcinogens like pushed on you. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's a civil rights kind of like act in my opinion for that. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I would agree with them here in the fact that if the EPA has studied it, what's the point of the EPA then if state law can just oversee it? I think it just creates two different markets, right? Where you have to have a different bottle with a different label, and it impugns your credibility. So
Well, I mean, just to Steelman, maybe the other side, or
yeah.
maybe to Steelman Prime's went a little bit more. Not that he can't do it himself, but like so and maybe slightly different because Canada is whatever 7, 8 provinces, and United States is 50 states. But like we have different labeling based off of provinces. As in Quebec,
Oh,
like
really?
there's a huge emphasis. Yeah, there's a huge emphasis on like French labeling, and
Of
Quebec usually
course.
has its own like regulatory bodies as well.
Oh, that's a good point.
And so let's say that does not appear to be a hurdle, but I understand 50 states is definitely different than, whatever, 7, 8 provinces and
Sounds like
territories.
a very Quebec thing to do. First of all,
It is a very Quebec thing to do.
Absolutely.
We are a unique nation within a united Canada.
Okay,
Beautiful.
fair enough.
Happy 4th of July.
I mean, I am sensitive to the thought of like creating, onerous regulatory burdens. Now, I don't give a damn about Monsanto, right? Like, F those guys.
Neither do I.
But like the principle, I understand, right? Like, and you wouldn't want that for like other companies. And I mean, you can imagine in unfair favored company, like let's say within the South or something, right? Like getting some sort of like onerous like labeling regulated onto them, and then you have to like manage that or not be able to sell. I can see that being a problem. Like I said, I'm not gonna. It's not gonna hill I'm gonna die on here.
Yeah.
I can see things from the other side, but yeah, uh, yeah. I just leave
It's
it there.
yeah, it is tricky. That's what, like I said, my position would flip, as in like if the EPA had what I perceived as the wrong position on the science, I would be on the state side if they were saying something different, as in they were the state was saying, oh, this is not a carcinogen, so you don't need to put the labeling on, or if anything, like you should not put the labeling on, right? And so I guess I'm being inconsistent in that regard, or rather, I
So
guess,
should raw milk be labeled? Even I'm not sure what the federal position is on raw milk, but if it's not, if the federal position is that it is safe to sell, within like in whatever markets they do, but like that's safe to sell. Would you all say that you don't want the states to be able to attach something there?
yeah,
That's a good question.
That's a good question, and that pokes a hole like in my or in my position, because it's like, yeah,
Mm.
if the EPA was saying, it's like, or determining that raw milk is safe or is comparable in safety to pasteurized milk, and that is reflected in the labeling, or that's like their labeling guidelines, I would totally then be advocating for like, okay, states have to be able to like override this. This is like a bad position.
I'm asking Opus about the raw milk regulations for the labeling right now. Short answer: there's no federal labeling scheme specific to raw milk for human consumption because federal law bans its interstate sale outright. Labeling requirements exist only at the state level.
Okay, interesting. But we can imagine a world where whatever, if those laws were changed and whatever, interstate
Yeah.
commerce was a thing.
Yeah, interesting. From the article, the Trump administration joined the case on Bayer's or Monsanto's side, reversing the position taken by the Biden administration. The Trump administration support for the Roundup manufacturer has been controversial among the MAHA movement, whose activists had largely supported Mr. Trump's 2024 campaign. Zen Honeycutt, founder of Moms Across America and advocate for the MAHA movement, on Thursday called the decision, quote, worse than treason, end quote, and said it reflected a betrayal of Trump's promises to the MAHA movement. Quote, it really is chemical warfare on the American people, she said, end quote. Vani Hari, a food activist and leading voice in the MAHA movement, known as the Food Babe, God, kill me. Quote, it's really sickening, end quote. She said
They're
the
an
glyphosate.
awful health and wellness influencer.
God, exactly. She has 100,000 followers, so now she gets quoted in New York Times. She said that glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, quote, becomes the midterm issue, end quote. That is, I don't know about that. I don't know.
That's
But
probably
he has done a
100%
lot of stuff
accurate, yeah.
to support the manufacturing of glyphosate and to support this stuff. I mean, I think it honestly comes down to the farmers, like probably the farmers union, and trying to like shore up those bases. That's the only thing I could think politically why he's so steadfastly for this stuff.
And also,
Or he just got paid by Monsanto. I mean, simple.
Oh, he's
that
getting
wouldn't
so
surprise me.
much money from other. He's getting billions from Trump coin. I don't know if Monsanto even tickles him.
But at least based off of the quote that is in the article that they're quoting Ketanji Brown Jackson, it seems so. The quote is Justice Jackson wrote that in her view, the majority had misunderstood the scope of the federal law, leaving the Missouri man without a remedy for the significant harms he has suffered. So at least based off of that, so I may be extracting a little bit, but it sounds like she views it that the glyphosate has harmed this farmer. And that's where I would disagree. Or rather, that's her position.
In the original lawsuit, Mr. Durnall said the company should be liable for failing to warn users about the risk of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from exposure to glyphosate. In 2023, a jury in the Circuit Court of City of St. Louis, a state court, sided with Durnall. So, and that's how it got to the Supreme Court. So it's just like, how could like a state court, a circuit court in St. Louis is going to have overriding judgment on whether or not something is deemed like cancerous or not. I don't know. That seems weird. That just seems weird to me. I don't feel like that's the right way to
I don't know.
decide that.
Of course, prove harm all the time, though. So I mean, like, yeah. I mean, when the federal government doesn't work, like, yeah, you'll take it to court like this. You know, this is a pollution thing, and you can prove harm. That cancer rates are increasing in this particular area, right? Like, not talking about glyphosate in particular, but just like smog or something, right? Like, you're in Cancer Alley, and like you look at the cancer rates, and they've been increasing, and then you can get redress there.
Just from they mentioned the EPA in the 2020 decision. So I just wanted to read what the EPA actually says about glyphosate. So after receiving and considering public comments on the glyphosate proposed interim decision, the EPA published the interim decision registration review for glyphosate. As part of this action, the EPA found that there's no risk of concern to human health when glyphosate is used in accordance with its current label. EPA also found that glyphosate is unlikely to be a human carcinogen. The ID also identified potential ecological risks to non-target organisms, primarily non-target plants, through spray drift, which I think is absolutely the runoff from farms is significant, and it would be absolutely detrimental to the environment. The ID identified interim risk mitigation measures in the form of label changes, including spray drift management language, herbicide resistance management language, a non-target organism advisory, and certain label consistency measures. And this happens every 15 years, so this would be up in 2035 to do glyphosate again.
I mean, I'm definitely not opposed, like, relitigating this as new research comes out. Like, definitely, to be clear, I'm not saying that absolutely, we know for certain that, glyphosate is 100% safe, at least as of now. Like, I think it's so far the evidence strongly points in the direction of it being essentially safe and the typical uses.
I mean, from what I've heard, the studies of it actually causing harm, I mean, we're talking to the level of like 2,000 pickles, like 2,000 cucumbers. Sorry, like the level that you would have to eat in order for it to be like bad at your working level. Because it's not only is it sprayed on the plant, but then it's sprayed. It's going to be handled and then washed, and then you're going to have it like
some sort of limit.
Yeah.
And maybe farmers, or like one particular farmer, this might be a unique case. I'm not totally ruling out the possibility that, I don't know if the farmer is not taking appropriate. I don't know what safety precautions are recommended when using Roundup, but I imagine they're pretty standard. But maybe not. But like, yeah, I can imagine a world where a farmer, through indirect exposure, but being, maybe exposed on a daily basis consistently, maybe it builds up. But even then, I'd be highly skeptical. But yeah, it's tough. But yeah, from everything that I have seen so far, it tracks with what you said in terms of like the dose required to actually reach toxic levels, or what would be considered unsafe levels, is just not really. You're highly unlikely to encounter that in the real world.
Exactly. I mean, guys, we're not plants. I mean, I don't know. We're not a plant. I don't know what to tell you.
Hey, don't be so quick to judge. Some people say I have the intellectual capabilities of a plant. But at least the example that at least for me best illustrates, as in like, okay, if I inform people that your drinking water is filled with viruses, and I say, actually every sip of water that you take from the tap, there are viruses in it. And if I ask the question, well, why don't you get sick? And I can point to, well, those viruses don't infect people. As in, those are bacteriophages. As in, those are specifically viruses that infect bacteria. And that's due to the fact that those viruses are species specific to bacteria. And that's why every glass of water that you drink, like, you are exposed to bacteriophages all around you. Okay, there's no getting away from them, as far as I can tell. And that is a testament to how important, or rather, how strong of a barrier species specificity is. Okay, as in if you can regularly be exposed, to viruses that are specific to bacteria for every sip of water or everything that you consume virtually on a daily basis, then I would say the same logic. Although we also have evidence, more or less, that species barrier of you not being a plant is a strong barrier for glyphosate not being toxic to you.
Mm-hmm. I just asked Opus, like, what would be the threshold to reach the amount of like corn, which is notoriously tons of glyphosate. So that'd probably be the highest exposure, I would assume. So in order to get to the point where it's a detrimental to your health, we're talking for the EPA, you're talking 40 kilograms of corn or 250 ears of corn you'd have to eat, 200,000 kernels. For the WHO or the EU is actually the most stringent. That's only 40 milligrams in one day that you're allowed to be exposed to. That would be 11 kilograms of
Well, to be
corn
fair, right?
ears.
Like for this case, it's not about for this particular case, right?
Yeah.
It's not about like eating. It's like what Cory said. He was talking about use within a farm, right? Like use within an agricultural processes. And in that case, I mean, like the label on the Roundup bottle, right, is not something that appears to the person eating the food that the Roundup sprayed on, right?
That's a good point.
Instead, it's for the farmer themselves. And I am not equipped to answer the question whether glyphosates are safe, right? Like I'm just not there. But it seems to me that using that stuff daily, right? Having it flowing from your environment, that you could have that level of buildup, like reasonably. But again,
No, but that's a reasonable intuition, and I don't actually really disagree. That's why I brought up the scenario. Like I can imagine a scenario of like, I don't know, if a farmer's not is being exposed literally on a daily basis, and I don't know, they're like not washing their hands appropriately as they're handling it not without gloves, as in not following appropriate safety precautions. I can see that world where it builds up, but then it's like, well, yeah, I don't know. Again, I guess I'd have to consult. What are the safety precautions that are recommended when a farmer uses Roundup? Yeah. If there are none, then maybe that's a problem. And maybe then they should be held liable.
I mean, a lot of this is like because of mass spraying, basically just doing these huge barrels in these airplanes and then dumping it all across your acres. But and this is specifically also why we were looking into the lab that I was in, my PhD lab, like trying to do like micro delivery of nutrients to plants, like for this exact reason, to have less exposure for the environment, to have less runoff into the environment through that, and then also just more acutely deliver the exact nutrients as the plant needs when it needs it. So I think that is the future of farming, like in general, kind of being able to see in an area like, oh, magnesium is lower in this area for all these plants, so you just kind of dosage all these plants in this specific area with more magnesium than normal or something like that. Phosphorus or potassium or whatever that is, and in accordance with that, doing more targeted approaches for herbicides that are like more species specific for sure. I would think that's kind of that's where farming is going to go. So I'd hope so.
Yeah, hopefully. I don't disagree with that. The last thing that I'll say on the article, and like, well, I think you brought up as well, Greg, of like, yeah, the fact that the New York Times is quoting the food babe, I think is poor form.
Yeah, that was wild.
What did they label her as? They label her as
the food babe,
an expert.
Yeah, it's just one of those MAHA influencers.
Leading voice in the MAHA movement.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then fair enough. Okay. Well, I mean, if that's what then that's what she is, right? That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, she
if
is.
they're like
but
a
also,
food expert, an agricultural expert, then that'd be different, right?
No, but I like just the fact that because and I take your point, and it is true to it's not inaccurate to characterize them as the leading voice in the MAHA movement, but just the fact that, let's say, just appearing in the New York Times in and of itself sort of like lends credibility type of thing.
Fair. But I
So
mean, then again, I mean, RFK Jr. is in the in the administration. I mean, like
True.
MAHA is already ascended, right?
it's very true.
I mean, I mean, not like I'm trying to defend these people. It's just that
No, I know that.
I mean, the reality of the situation is a nightmare. So, you know, well, sorry. So, did you want to? Say
Yeah, I
else,
just wanted to
Cory?
real quickly. I asked Opus about like how common is it the exposure limits that we're seeing in these EU and EPA levels. So the EPA, the chronic percentage or amount is 1.75 milligrams per kilogram per day. So the worst case farmer, okay, 60% had detectable urinary glyphosate and 40% had none at all. So 60% had some detectable traces of glyphosate in their urine on exposure day when they're spraying. So this is the worst case scenario. So the worst case scenario was 440 times below the problem threshold that the EPA has. So the median farmer was 17,000 times below it. So we're talking like even the farmers that are during these things, they need to have their median glyphosate levels raised by 17,000 fold in order for it actually to have any like harm done to them. That at least that's what the studies are saying now.
To be as charitable as possible, like we might have found like the one farmer who was adding it to his coffee.
I mean, the problem I feel like is it's good to have these questions. I think it's good, right, in general, because it's like this new thing is happening, correlation, cancers are happening also at the same time. How are they related? I think that the studies are important. I'm not downplaying them. I just feel like sometimes, especially with these kind of like naturopath stuff, we're kind of always chasing their one thing. It's always they're not looking at the big picture. Why people are unhealthy? Well, because they're obese. Versus like, oh, it's the food dyes that are making us obese. It's the glyphosate that's getting us sick. It's it's like, no, I think in general it's a lot easier. The health route is a lot easier, but they needlessly complicate it in order to try to like sell organic foods and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I can also understand, a farmer like searching for answers for their non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Of like, we all like to be able to explain the causes of the negative things that happen to us. And so I understand like if his daily experience is dealing with Roundup, okay, and he has extensive experience with it, and he comes across articles or the food babe saying or getting the message, pushing the message of like how toxic it is and causes cancer. I don't necessarily blame the farmer for having in their mind of like, oh, I have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yeah.
I have dealt with the Roundup regularly. It must be the Roundup.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I think it's totally normal. It's a totally normal thing to go through. Like, going through like my mom dying of cancer. So many conversations at the end. Like, what did I do? What could I possibly have done to cause this? And she's trying to go through her mind, and you're trying to think about like, could that been it? Or it's a natural inclination in order to try to see like what's happening. And but that's at some point we have to kind of like trust the science, and we have to just do a better study. And if one doesn't exist, then that's what our current knowledge is, and try to track down the actual culprit, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I'm just trying to be, I guess somewhat as compassionate as possible in terms of, not totally dismissing the farmer's experience.
No,
And
I'm with you.
I understand the motivation. The motivation for the lawsuit is probably not malicious. Okay, he probably does feel like genuinely hurt by whatever this chemical. But like, yeah, I agree with you. I am on the side of like the evidence, and I think the evidence in my mind, I could be wrong so far. There's not good reasons to believe that the Roundup is responsible for this. And as much as I don't necessarily like to side with the conservative Supreme Court, I think this is the right ruling.
Lift up our oligarchs and they make something correct. But this is the two-parter.